I would like to welcome everyone today to Kiggins Commons and to those of you that are online to the Shoals Marine Lab's tribute to the life and legacy of John M. Kingsbury. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Morris, the current John M. Kingsbury Executive Director of the Shoals Marine Lab. When Jack died last May, we lost the driving force of the creation of the lab. But I hope that what we are celebrating today is the man who had a vision and a passion and a commitment to create something truly special, the Shoals Marine Lab. The people who will speak today provide a variety of perspectives and views of Jack's influence on the lab, the education we provide, and the impact that he and the lab have had on a wide range of people's lives. We'll begin with a slideshow prepared by Jack's daughter, Joanna Kingsbury Smith, of the early years of John M. Kingsbury's life. The first of our speakers today will be Bob Meadows, who provides a perspective on the building years and the volunteers who help build the lab and continue to provide critical support each year as the lab prepares to welcome students and to close down at the end of each season. His continued personal relationships with the Kingsburys over the years demonstrate the strength of the connections forged on Appledore and between Jack and the people that he mentored.
Good morning. Glorious day to really celebrate Jack's life. And I was born and raised in Ithaca, and went to Cornell, started in '68. And then and of course, being brought up in the '60s, I was kind of a Cousteau kid, Cousteau generation. So I wanted to swim with the fishes, which I eventually did. But and in I guess in the spring semester of my sophomore year, I took this course in psychology taught by Dr. John M. Kingsbury. And, that's kind of close to marine and saltwater, going in the right direction. And, Jack was just a fantastic lecturer, very engaging. And also he had this little project he was working on. He kind of mentioned about the island out in Maine and these days. Interesting. And so later in the semester, he put a little sign up on the wet lab there in plant science. If anybody wanted to volunteer that summer, to come out and help open this abandoned island. That sounds like a great idea. So I guess one group had gone out 2 years before that, but you really couldn't tell it when you got here. So we lived on Star Island because there's no place to live here. And we commute over in the whaler from Star and just come into Baps Cove here. No docks, there's nothing. Just kind of land on the rocks, crawl up the seaweed, trusted shoreline, and just kind of see a building, start heading for it through the poison ivy and brambles. And our base was kind of at the Leighton House. We kind of sit there, drink Kool-Aid and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch, and just slowly start finding infrastructure, roads, wells, the condition of buildings, and it was a very long, tedious process. Then actually, so going forward, in 1971, Jack had raised enough money to actually get Cornell approval to actually start building something. So he hired Don Grata, and Don came to Cornell in the winter of '71 to hire a crew to come out here to work on it. So I got interviewed and was hired. That was fun. So we came out in the summer of '71, and we lived on island. And my room was the second one from the top in the radar tower at the penthouse suite. But we were employees of Don, so the university people, they couldn't live there, but we could. There weren't any stairwells there. At the top, you had to crawl, stand on a piece of pipe and crawl through a hole to get up there. But we had the greatest entertainment deck on top. We did no party. There was no alcohol served, if you believe that. So, and we did many things. Again, really raw energy, not much knowledge. So Dom and Jack, they really had to kind of scalp to kind of direct that energy towards something productive, which it's easier said than done, right? Sarah and Jen. But so we actually built the forms to pour the grass lab foundations. Jack made a further attempt to dig the trenches, which were very well done, unfortunately on the wrong side of the line. And we all learned. It was a very, very good learning process. I mean, Jack was just a great mentor. I mean, I was a fairly shy, withdrawn kid. And it took me a while, but with Jack's tutelage, he would kind of drew you out and kind of, really allowed you to kind of find your strengths. So it was a great experience. And some of the biggest things I learned from him, especially when Jack was dealing with these bureaucracies, Cornell, UNH, the federal government, states. They have no bound on the paperwork and regulations, and they're very good at giving you no's. So Jack, he had a very just cause, a deserving cause. He knew it had to be done. His job was to find a way around it. And he was very creative at that. Some of the stories were really very humorous, like with the building permits in Rye. How he kind of tiptoed around that one. So you got to read that one. But it was just And I've used that in my life. I work for state government, and just finding ways to get the damn job done. You know, and get around it, not trying to violate any regulations, and not, you know, just monthly interim reports and updates, and, you know, spending time doing these reports. You're not actually out in the field doing something. And also the biggest asset, I think, of Jack's was communication. He could talk to to the college professors. He could talk to, the fishermen, and really he had a real knack of this really vernacular communication, just really communicating with people, um, conveying his enthusiasm for this project and trying to instill that in them, get them engaged in the project. So that was something that really helped me kind of, get out there and start, talking to people and really get more engaged in the community. And the one thing too is just, I mean, his skills and skill sets were really limitless. All the things he did that most people don't know. He carved the plaque for the grass lab, the wooden with flowers and scrolls and stuff in it. And that was in the grass lab for many years in the basement during the winter. And also to promote his first book on poison plants, he was on the television show for a couple of times, a couple of seasons. So I'm going to dig those up, and maybe I'll have that at the 60th reunion, show him actually on the stage, giving the being quizzed. And one thing you really can't forget is also his humor, just very wry. And I kind of go back to Bert and I. We were kind of at K House last night, and Betsy Bora, she has a great impression of Bert and I. She knows him by heart, but you can't get that here, So, and also the last few years, I spent time with Jack and Louise. I go up to Norwich to stay for a few days. I take them down to Bullard Farm for picnics and stuff. And I stay down maybe at Dragon Neck for a couple of weeks and kind of help them out, cook and clean, and kind of make it possible for me to be there. But we just sit on the back porch there overlooking the bay and just talk for hours on. He just talk all that stuff about his history, his father, his grandfather, the whole family. And it was just pretty engaging to hear all that personal history. And kind of one last thing, also too, again, one big asset too is just the CD, him actually reading the book, just hearing those reflections and that raw humor. It's great reading the book, but really to get that inflection, spirit, character was really rewarding. I drive from Delaware, like an hour drive, so I started playing on the way up. I got to about chapter 9. I got about 2 chapters left on the way back. But it's about 8 hours. And the other thing too that kind of really epitomized some of Jack's stuff is his book. He had a publishing company, Bullbriar Press, and here's some Smilax, Greenbrier, Bullbriar, and very tenacious, unrelenting, and that really kind of epitomizes Jack's spirit. If you ever, it's living barbed wire, literally. I mean, you don't try to fight it. I mean, I carry these regularly. I'd rather leave my flesh on my bones than on a vine. So, but just righteous, and I have a lot of respect for Bullbriar. I can see just in Jack's persona that he really related to that. And actually, he saw he had down to Craggy Neck. They have a pump house. He called it the wheelhouse. He'd go up there every afternoon and just kind of putter around there. But outside the window was Bullbriar. So, and that's kind of all I have to say. And just it's good to celebrate Jack's story, his history, and hopefully we pass that on, that spirit and drive. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Art Borer, who was among the original University of New Hampshire faculty who helped expand the scope of the lab's academic curricula beginning in the late 1960s. Art served as both a faculty member and associate director of the lab with Jack. His tenure as a faculty member was among the longest of the group of faculty from the lab's early years. Dr. Borer.
It's awful nice to see all you people here that I haven't seen for 40 or 50 years or so in some cases. And hope you have an enjoyable day. was probably back in the spring of 1972, when I got a call from Jack, and one of his faculty members here at the lab that couldn't be there that following summer. Ollie, who was the ornithologist, and so Jack gave me a call and wanted to know if I'd come out and join the teaching staff at Summit. So of course I was thrilled, honored at the chance, and so of course I accepted it. And after a decade time watching Jack operating his directorial responsibilities out here, I began to realize some of his talents and some of his special skills that allowed him to not only hire a group of people that could stand each other for a month up here and teach a lot of eager students, if possible, but to sometimes take on tasks that he needed to have done right then, and that really would not show up, say, in my CV. And I'm a protozoologist. I study ciliated protozoa. What do I know about electricity? Not very much. So he had the ability to hire people that he senses will be dedicated island people that he can rely on to do jobs, but they may not even be in their personal background. The following recollection of mine, I'll entitle "The Story of AT&T." Jack was good at finding sources of stuff on the mainland that might come in useful later on in the island operations. So he had gained access to coaxial cable and some old World War II era Army field telephone that worked on a crank and big batteries attached to them. And he told me about the fact that Dominic Grotta had laid all these cables, multi-axis cables around the island, and all that stuff I don't know anything about. And he says, put it all together and set it up so we've got telephone communication among the buildings. Because if you've got a telephone here with batteries and you go out with fire that goes over there in another building, and you turn the crank, it's going over the room. So that was the basic principle. I could understand that. And so eventually the thing was built. We had telephone communication. If somebody heard the phone ring and remembered how many rings it was for PK, whatever our system was, each building was assigned this crank code, voila, a working telephone. And neat but not gaudy, perfectly functional back before all the electronic marvels of this century, and appropriately named the Appledore Turner-Crank and Telephone Company, AT&T. But what it really taught me was something about Jack's extraordinary character, because he could think of things that ought to happen, and he could talk to one of the staff, and the staff would go do it, whether they knew anything about telephones or anything else. And we did that with everybody. Well, thank you. We've already heard some of those tales, and that's one of my favorite memories.
Our next speaker is Jackie Webb, who is the current chair of the Alumni and Friends Association of the Shoals Marine Lab. She represents students who have benefited from taking a Shoals course and gone on to have successful careers in marine science. She also represents the faculty who encourage their own students interested in the marine sciences to come to Shoals to take their courses. Dr. Webb.
I teach, I have PowerPoint slides. Are we good? Yeah, then. So besides the lab itself, the most important legacy of the Shoals Marine Lab and thus of Jack's leadership, vision, and unique energy and contagious enthusiasm is its alumni. Thousands of us carry the message and the magic of Shoals forward consciously and intentionally throughout our lives and careers, or unconsciously, given the impact that our time on Appledore has had on how we all think about the world and our place in it. My goal today is to highlight the impact that Jack has had on all of us through our Shoals experiences. Now, on a personal note, I went to Cornell. Jan was my inverts TA. Hey, Jan. When Jack was director of the lab, Dr. Anderson was my advisor. But I met him neither in Ithaca nor on Appledore. So where in the world did I meet Jack? Next slide. There we go. So I met Jack in Brooklyn. So this was at the New York, it was at the New York Aquarium, which was down the street from my house. And as you can see, Coney Island Beach is right there, and my house, home, apartment building over there, and the aquarium is right on Coney Island Beach. And I went to an experimental public high school, John Dewey High School, and we had the good fortune of having a unique marine biology program with incredibly inspirational teachers. And we were riding the first wave of environmental education following the first Earth Day. Many of us worked as education and outreach volunteers at the New York Aquarium. And then the summer of 1976, the year of the bicentennial, a benefactor funded a large festival of sorts at the aquarium, and I was asked to work at the event. One of the activities, and I do not know how this evolved, was an algae identification contest. And I was put on the aquarium team. Little did I know, but the thing was rigged. Ringers were being imported from elsewhere. I'm not sure of the connection. Maybe it was Joe Gerasi, the aquarium vet, who I later found out was a Shoals alum from the first class in 1966. But Jack was asked to come down to the aquarium and brought with him a carload of Shoals students, the opposing team, and a carousel of his algae slides. I knew two species. It was Brooklyn, after all, Fucus and Ulva. And needless to say, the Shoals team won. After Jack came over to me and said, when I told him I was a student at Cornell, he said, next summer, you're going to the Shoals Marine Lab. End of story. Next slide. Just going to do it that way. Yeah. So when I was in early in 1977, I landed on Appledore. And so here are just some pictures of the experience in Introduction to Marine Science in June. Day one, Dr. Borer, you had us out in the intertidal at low tide at 5 a.m. in a thunderstorm. Thank you. Founders Hall, which is right there, was home sweet home. It did not look like this back then. It was crazy. No walls, sheets on the walls, tacked into the studs. It was an adventure. And so there's Dr. Anderson on the rocks and Jeff Prince talking about health. And that, I think, is the only extant picture of me. And I did transect number 6. We all know our transects. So I came back as a TA and then a guest lecturer, now interim chair of the Alumni and Friends Association. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Next slide. So of the 54 students, no, back there you go. Of the 54 students in my class, a number of us have remained involved in the lab. And so Carol, where are you? Carol and Ron, there you are. And I know Sue Kennedy was on the island. Where are you, Sue? Here you are. And so many of us remain involved in the lab for many years. And I'm sure that each one of us can point to the Shoals experience as being very influential in our careers and lives. So whatever happened to the other Shoals alums? I have always felt that celebrating Shoals alums is really the key to defining the impact of the lab. It's one perspective. And the impact not only in the field of marine science, but also in the larger world, given the diverse trajectories that Shoals alums have followed. So in 2000, during my first sabbatical, I use the names in Jack's annual newsletters to compile a database of all student alums. And between emails and Google, primitive Google, and now more sophisticated Google, started tracking them down. Now, what I'm going to show you, the data portion of the talk, the data are very strongly biased, mostly alums who stayed in the fold in careers in marine and environmental sciences. And there are lots of gaps. This is not a scientific study. And we will talk more about tracking alums in the next couple of years. So if we go to the data slide. Okay, so in the Kingsbury era, according to the lists, there were over 1,000 students from 1966 to 1979. I may have a year off here, but 1979, from 600 different institutions. Okay, so that is remarkable unto itself. And I want to hear what Jack did to get those 600. I really want to, if anybody knows the secrets, I want to know. Cornell 333, UNH 91, the SUNY system 97, University of Vermont 21. This is in descending order. And then Drew University in New Jersey, 15. Anybody have an idea why there were 15 students from Drew University? And before Lee Pollock, Louise Bush, one of the founders of the lab. And from the Kingsbury era, when I did the study, we also knew that 168 K-12 teachers came through the lab, through the teachers courses. And of the alums that we know of, data from 1999, from the students from the Kingsbury era, 36 PhDs, 1 ZVM, and 4 MDs. And then also in 1999, I started gathering on all the alums. And so at that time, the data said we had faculty at 31 different colleges and universities, mostly in marine and biological sciences, 3 medical schools, and this was in the US and the UK. And at that time, they were also at 24 or more graduate students and postdocs. So this is incredibly impressive, right? This is amazing. So now the next slide is the required unreadable slide. And you can tell by the font size that there was a lot to say. And in bold, you'll see the categories of careers that alums were in and are in. I think I've captured everybody who's here, but I know at least there's one chef that I did not capture. So I need to add chef on there. Sorry, Sam. But you can see this incredible list of what alums have done. I can give anybody who wants it a list of this, but it's really quite remarkable. And so you think of the number of fields that Shoals alums have gone into and have carried the message. Now I have, next slide, I have some information about one alum in particular who couldn't be here. I corresponded with him for past couple of weeks. And so Ron Harlstad, you all may know as the captain of the RAC, also helped in building the lab. And he wrote the following. You can read it yourselves, but I'll read it out loud. I recall hauling construction material out to the island from Kittery Point, lumber, concrete, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 2 to 4 round trips a day was not unusual. Jack and I started some of those days at first light, often didn't finish until after dark. The time of high tide at Kittery Point and then loading on the island at the high water dock determined our daily schedule. Next slide. Ron, as ship captain, said, interesting life I've had would probably never have happened without Jack's accepting my application for the marine science course at the Isles of Shoals, and he was in one of the classes on STAR. He then goes on to say, it opened so many opportunities in marine science for me over the years. I didn't end up being a scientist, but rather an oceanographic research vessel captain. I retired as marine superintendent and senior captain for the RV Atlantic Explorer, shown here, at the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences. So if you go to the next slide, he also sent me a menagerie of all the ships that he had worked on, and he credits the Shoals and Jack for his career on all of these wonderful ships. So he is now living in Wisconsin, and on an alpaca farm. So next slide. So SML's legacy, Jack's legacy is people. So the picture on the left is actually all these pictures are from Jack's retirement party in 1983. You'll see some of you in there. Where's Jack Cutler? Do you see yourself? Okay. And so there's a whole variety of people. We should really match this up with that class of 66 picture. And so that was a wonderful event. Next slide. And what's remarkable is that when we meet up after 1 year or several decades here at Shoals or bump into each other in Woods Hole or at scientific conferences, so Woods Hole on the right and at a conference on the left, the connection is really still there. We all have unique memories and speak the same language. Next slide. It's because we all have experienced those things that are uniquely Appledore. The food line, fire and water, the food, the volleyball court, which is no longer, the RV namesake carved out of a watermelon, and the masking tape. And Sarah, thank you for bringing back masking. And if anybody wants to know about the duffel bag in the lower right-hand corner, that's another story. Jack hated that story, so I don't want to repeat it in public, but it's an Appledore story, unique Appledore story. Next slide, and I'm almost done. And the other thing is that we have also developed some of the same cultural obsessions, whether it's seeking out books by Celia in the garden or about the garden or going Hassan hunting whenever we're at a museum. So you'll see Celia and then that's Jack in the garden at Heiser Fest in 2012. Kept on saying, why does everybody want to take a picture of me in the garden? That's why. And so those are some of the Hassans I've discovered. So some of them you might have seen, but the lady on the rocks you may not have seen. I knew it was where I was going to be on a trip, and it's in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And I don't recommend running across an art gallery in Israel. It's probably not a smart thing to do because they probably wonder what you're doing. But I chugged across the Impressionist gallery because I knew it was there. I wanted to see her. And so I stopped dead in my tracks and I took the picture, and the guard says to me, "Why are you so excited?" And I said, "Because I know those rocks." And then I turned and I just went. It was fun. It was really fun. So next slide. I just want to say something about what Sarah mentioned, that is sending students to the Shoals. So the next generation. My experience here had a critical, if not the most critical impact on my career as a faculty member, first at Villanova and then at University of Rhode Island, where I just finished my 18 years there. I'm now retired. My teaching, advising, research mentoring, and my focus on organismal biology, being able to hold the organism in your hand, really came from Shoals. And so for the past several years, I've had the pleasure, decades, sorry, not years, I had the pleasure of sending my students to the Shoals to pass on the magic. And on the bottom, there's 6 of my students who I've sent here to this wonderful island. And let's see, no, stay there. And I have a quote from Paige Odiar, who was here this summer, and she said it the best: "Words cannot express how much Appledore has changed my life. I cannot imagine my life without it. This experience not only helped me become a better scientist, but a happier version of myself. I've never been so excited and hopeful for my future." Can't bottle that stuff. Next slide. For Jan and for Dr. Anderson. And so my students would complain, "Why do you make us have a lab notebook?" First 2 images on the left. "Why are you making us do this lab notebook? Why?" And I said, "Because they made me do it." And Jan, these are the 4x6 cards that you made us do. Rachel is shaking her head, yes. I still have them. And when they complain about their lab notebooks, I pull out my cards and I show them what I had to do, and that I still know my inverts better than anybody should who studies fish because of that. So thank you. And thank you to Dr. Anderson. So next slide. So in ending, I just want to mention the Alumni and Friends Association. We founded this in 2018. Sue Kennedy, where are you? There you are. So Sue has been the inaugural secretary. I was vice chair. Mike Coburn was chair. And I now have stepped up as interim chair. And we're going to have an election to sort that all out. The mission, as you can see, is just to do good things for the Shoals. I'm paraphrasing, do good things for the Shoals through the actions and interests of our alumni. And so stay tuned for more important announcements about AFA in the future. And so the next slide, there we go. And so I want to thank Jack, and I want to thank Louise, who's here today. I'm sure you've all met her now, you've all seen her now, for everything. And Louise, she's reading. Is she reading? Yes. I just want to say a special thank you from my mother, who told me this morning that she wanted to say thank you to you and to Jack for everything that you did for me through your work here at the Shoals Lab, which has such an impact on my life. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Patty McGill, who completed her master's and PhD degrees at Cornell University studying the gulls of Appledore. She later served as the first female director of the Shoals Marine Lab from 1994 to 1995. She provides a unique perspective as a Shoals alum, graduate researcher, staff member, and former director of the lab. Please welcome Dr. Patty McGill.
I just noticed that Jan got skipped, well, I want to thank, of course, Sarah and Louise and all the people who helped make this event happen. It's such a pleasure to be back on the island. It's been, I think the last time I was here was the 50th anniversary celebration, so this is great fun. Okay, so I'm going to remember Jack by telling a couple short stories that illustrate Jack Kingsbury, otherwise known as Dr. Kingsbury. Some people also knew him as Action Jack. But anyway, while I was when I was a new graduate student at Cornell, I'd come from grew up in the Midwest, did my undergraduate years in Colorado, so not very familiar with the ocean. So I was a new graduate student, of course, casting around for a field project. My major professor was a mammalogist studying pine voles in upstate New York. That wasn't really where I wanted to go with my career. So, you know, I'm casting around trying to find something. And of course, as a new student, you're trying to think about what's the kind of subject you want to study, what are the kinds of questions you want to ask, and what kinds of organisms do you want to work on. So I explored all kinds of possibilities. And finally, my advisor, this mammalogist, I think he was getting a little frustrated by then because I had so many false starts, great ideas, but I couldn't fund them or they weren't practical or whatever. He says to me, okay, so I have this colleague / friend next door over in plant sciences, and he has this island. There's a marine lab out there. So go talk to him and maybe there's something out there that you can work on. So I met Dr. Kingsbury. Anyway, so I talked with Jack and he, of course, knew that my advisor was a mammalogist. And so his eyes lit up and he's like, we have muskrats. And so he talks to me about the muskrats and you know, crazy population of muskrats, 10 miles off the coast, you know, and swim among the islands, you know, so nutty situation. So I go back and I start learning about muskrats and about trapping and marking and what I was going to have to do to study muskrats. And I also started learning about this poison ivy habitat that they lived in that was taller than me, and how you trap a muskrat, and if the muskrat gets alarmed and feels cornered, it can jump just about this high. So I thought, I think I really want to study muskrats. So I go back to Jack and I say, I didn't think that was going to be my project. And so what was his response? He says, well, we have a lot of gulls. And then he offered me the job as dishwasher for that summer. And I could borrow the phrase, the rest is history. Actually, I should have asked you to start my slideshow. Sorry, I think we got off schedule because we missed Jan. We'll get back to Jan. Okay. So could I have the first slide there? All right, so these were the first two lessons from Jan. Assess the situation and take a chance. He didn't know me from Adam, you know. He figured out, okay, as who was it that said he looked for people that were good shoalers, you know, that were going to be good island people. And he took a chance on me. And he believed in the, capacity of others. All right. Okay, so, I'm leave Cornell campus, I get up here to Kittery Point, I get down to the dock and there's Jack, I recognized him. And, so we boarded the rack and we took off into the fog. So sometime later, because the rack was not the fastest vessel, we arrived on Appledore, which then of course was my new home and family. And as it turns out, intermittently for about 30 seasons, I was coming out here, so behind schedule now to keep coming back. So the next couple lessons that I learned from Jack was to be welcoming, be part of the community, and he was very good at setting the stage to build community. And so as my investigations continued, some years spending 6 months out here on the island, among the first people on island, because that's when the gulls were returning and some of the last to leave. But as my investigations continued, I learned so much from others around me. I mean, Art Bohr, of course, our resident protozoan specialist, turned ornithologist. I learned so much from him. But I learned, of course, more and more from Jack. In fact, next slide. And that is to share your vision. You know, what are we all about out here? And then who said it? I think Bob Meadows said it. Figure out how to get started and then figure out how to adapt. So you, of course, learn those lessons out here. And the next slide, also a couple more things I learned during those years of being a graduate student out here: to start small, but think big. And so to figure out how to get started on whether it was building a marine lab or designing a field study that went on for years on gulls and competition, and it took me to Australia and all kinds of places. But start small and think big, and to persist, sort of no matter what. So again, as the years continued, there came a point, it was probably around the time that Jack was retiring from being the lab director, and he and Louise were planning a sabbatical in Australia. I think maybe it was I think maybe they were going to another island, Tasmania. And so they needed someone to house sit or take care of their home while they were gone. So Ron Harleston and I were onboarded, seconded. And so we learned their expectations, caring for the horse, and I did say horse, not house. So caring for the horse, planting the vegetable garden come spring, including the corn crop that they were expecting, and cleaning the white wood trim that occurred all throughout their lovely home. So, well, the horse survived, the woodwork was clean, and I left for the island, so I can't attest to the vegetable crop. But Louise, I hope you were satisfied. You never said anything afterwards, but I hope you were satisfied. So the next slide then shows a couple more lessons I learned, and that is expect to believe in the capacity of others, which somehow got lost, and to expect the best. So again, life continues, my career advanced. I've been able to use so many of these lessons over time. And as Sarah mentioned, I was fortunate and honored to spend a year as the interim director out here. The year when when John Heiser left, and the second director, and when John left, there wasn't a lot of time to find a replacement right away. And so I was interim director that coming season to keep things afloat, and it's still here, so I definitely did an okay job. But again, you continue to learn, you learn these lessons, you interpret them in new ways throughout your life and your career and your personal life. So to conclude, I really want to, and I need the next slide, yeah. You add lessons to that foundation that you've been instilled with, given when you're young. And so to conclude, I want to thank Louise Kingsbury for imagining this possibility of honoring Jack out here on the island. I, of course, want to thank Sarah Morris for inviting me to be involved. And I guess that's maybe the final lesson that I would say, there's always more lessons to realize you receive from someone. But one that I forgot to put up here is to thank others. And so right now I want to thank you, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty, and I'm really, really sorry, Jan. Well, especially since it would have been a perfect segue into Jan's talk after Jackie had given that perfect background for the impact that Jan had had. Like many of the speakers today, Jan Factor is an alum of the Shoals Marine Lab. He is a lifelong Shoals faculty member, a longtime Shoals faculty member who began teaching in field marine science, the successor to Introduction to Marine Science that Jack initiated. He now teaches in Ecology of the Marine Environment and Evolution of Marine Diversity, the successors to FMS. I expect he also developed his career-long passion, the study of the American lobster, out at the Shoals. With that, I welcome Dr. Jan Factor.
Oh my God, there's so many stories, right? They all have stories. Because I think today, everybody is putting out to remember it. The story I would like to tell you starts much earlier. On July 8th, in 1873, Louis Agassiz, Harvard professor, welcomed his first class to Penakees Island, one of the Elizabeth Islands, to a newly established marine station that was named after a benefactor, the Anderson School of Natural History, no relation to our Anderson. Agassiz met the students at the dock when they got off the boat. And we're told gave a long impromptu lecture. Most notably, he told them study nature, not books. That became a famous phrase. It's on a banner that to this day is at the Marine Laboratory in Woods Hole. We fast forward just about 30 years. In June of 1970, I got off the boat at Star to take one of the early classes at the Shoals Marine Lab before we moved to Appleton. John Kingsbury greeted us when we arrived, but he didn't give us a long, boring lecture. He must have said a few, welcome to the rock. But then he told us to go get our boots on and meet him on the rocks in front of the Oceanic Hotel in Star. And there, he gave us an introduction to the engine pipe, right off the bat, almost literally right off the boat. You see, it was low tide. And what I learned that day was a bunch of things. I learned why we were there. I also learned low tide is never to be wasted. You don't just let it go, you take advantage of it. Like he took advantage of so many other opportunities. He didn't admonish us to study nature, but not books. But he showed us, introduced us to how to study nature, not books. That's after all why we were here. And for me, a college kid from the big shitty, as J.B. Heiser used to call it. Just as an aside, I was looking at Jackie's aerial photo of Coney Island and the New York Aquarium where she grew up, and I grew up on Coney Island. I could have pointed it out in the picture, right on the water. Not very far, I didn't know Jackie then. But that was pretty much my worldview. And oh, sorry. And I'm shocked I can't actually project in this room. And my first day at Shoals in June of 1970 opened up a whole new world for me. It was my first experience in New England because New Yorkers thought the whole world was New York, just like I'm told Bostonians do, center of the world. Why go anyplace else? It was my first exposure on a Maine island. Actually, it was New Hampshire, but let's not quibble. And it was my first real field experience. And that program and we've heard a lot and read a lot about how John Kingsbury, I should just take an aside here. I'm the only person in the room probably was never called him Jack and never can, because he was my professor. And then he was in graduate school on my graduate committee. And the familiar terms there were Dr. K for John Kingsbury and Dr. A for John Anderson. And I could never refer to any of them as a first name. I still can't, because I still think of them as my professors. But so we know that John Kingsbury took the place, but John Kingsbury and John Anderson together, with help from the other founding faculty, devised the original program, the Introduction to Marine Science, which later became Field Marine Science, which later morphed into a couple of different courses. But that program altered my life, my path in life in many ways. It led to graduate school at Cornell with John Anderson. It led to being a Shoals TA starting in 1973 here on the first year on Appledore. It led to a career in biology. It led to a love for field work. And eventually led to being on the faculty of Shoals Marine Lab some 10 years later, when I got a call from John Heiser saying, hey, we need an invertebrate biologist. Are you available? Said, I can be there tomorrow. When do you need? Now they can't get rid of me. But I'll never forget that first day at Shoals with John Kingsbury in the intertitle. And in every course I've taught at Shoals, I take students out on the first available low tide. Sometimes it was right off the boat. They got there early enough and there was a low tide in the afternoon. Sometimes it was the next morning if the tides weren't cooperating. And because here at Shoals, we still study nature, not books. We study living organisms in their natural habitat, not dried out or preserved specimens like back on campus. And we try never to waste a low tide. And it was almost a cliche here at Shoals, and you've heard it a couple of times this morning. It did for me, like it did for some of you, many others, that this program at Shoals changed my life, set me on a different path, opened up new opportunities, the way nothing on campus could ever have done. And I've spent all my time here at Shoals trying to pay that forward to the next generation and the next generation of Shoals Marine Lab students. And here at the Shoals Marine Lab, as Kingsbury himself pointed out in an essay, we are truly the inheritors of Louis Agassiz's School of Natural History, apparently the first marine station in the United States, and also dedicated to undergraduates. And we fulfill that admonition to study nature, not books, here every day. Every day. And that philosophy of experiential field education has been passed along. I saw it in action at first when I took the course. John Kingsbury, John Anderson, Holly Hewitt, and the others who participated that summer. When I first started on the faculty for Intro to Marine Science here on Appledore, I saw it in action from the two faculty I worked with, Art Bohr and Jeff Prince. And I learned from them how to do this, how to expose students to this. And Art and I were talking about this yesterday, and how to have a whole lot of fun doing it. And hopefully the students had a whole lot of fun doing it too. And no matter the course taught out here, no matter the subject matter, whether it's intertidal work, algae, invertebrates, fish, birds, whatever the course, the philosophy is the same. And it was Kingsbury's philosophy. Roll up your sleeves and learn by doing. And that also stuck with me all these years. So from the very beginning, I'd also like to say that John Kingsbury enlisted the help of young college students. You saw some of those pictures from Jackie. They literally helped build this. Some were on the construction crew in the early days and helped build this building and renovate some of the other cottages on the island. They now make good use of. And captained the boat, like my old friend Ron Harrelson. And they cooked the meals, like the first cook at Charles Marine Lab School, Feigenberg. He was a student at the hotel school at Cornell. And they ran the day-to-day operations of the place. And they helped teach courses as TAs, like my TAs for the course, Chuck Walker and at UNH, and Phil Z, who spent a lot of years at Georgetown. All with some adult supervision, of course. Sometimes a little more supervision and sometimes a lot less supervision. But this cadre of young people, along with Jack Kingsbury and the others, built this place. And that's still true. We still have a cadre, changing cadre over the years of young students, college students, and recent graduates who still make the Charles Marine Lab and make it run quite well. And so I'd like to tip my hat to the early ones and the ones in between, and some of the ones who work on the island right now. Now, we're sitting right there, who took the Shoals course just a couple of summers ago. And like so many of the rest of us, of the place, came back. Hopefully you'll never leave just like I never left. So there are lots of stories, and Kingsbury told many of those stories himself in the book. That in my mind, John Kingsbury's most important legacy is building the program of experiential learning that changed young lives, many, including mine. So I want to thank all those people who influenced me and set me on the right path. God knows what would have happened to me if I never left New York City. I hate to think about that. And hopefully every student who's taken the Shoals course since then has been similarly influenced by the experience. How could they know? Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Jim Morin, who served as the director of the Shoals Marine Lab from 1997 to 2005. During that time, he worked to gain support from the National Science Foundation for a research experiences for undergraduate program at the lab, and expansion of Jack's broad definition of training undergrads. Kingsbury House was also planned and built during his tenure as director. Jim is unable to be here with us today. He is on the West Coast and he'll be joining us by Zoom.
Am I visible? No. There we go. Can you hear me? I can't tell if you can hear me. So I come to you this morning from a one magical place to another magical place. I have a house out here on Helby Island, which is in Barkley Sound on the west coast of Vancouver Island, out in a pretty wild and woolly place. And I've been coming here for 40 years with an interim period when I went to Shoals for those 8 years. So it's with a great pleasure that I have spent so much of my career, especially my summers, on these amazing kinds of islands. But more to the point, I'm the first speaker here who didn't have interactions with Jack in my formative years, but I came on much later after Jack had stepped down and after JB had stepped down and Patty McGill had done her stint and came to Shoals primarily for the same reasons that JB and Patty and Jack were so instrumental on the that's interesting. My notes just flew off my computer. I'm sitting outside and I'm not sure I'll be able to recover them, but that's okay. I'll just wing it. So I knew Jack when he was older. I'm old now, and he was older at that time, and so I never knew those formative years at all. And so going back to Joanna's PowerPoint slides, I'm sorry, Joanna, but Jack was never a kid. He was always we have a problem here. I'm not. Uh-oh. You know what? Can we go to Willie, because I need to my battery, I'm losing power, and so I need to go do some changing. So if you can change me out for now, that'd be great.
Should I just go ahead? Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Hear me?
Hi. Thanks so much. So I can just go ahead from here?
I was gonna introduce you.
Okay, good.
Willie Bemis served as the director of the Shoals Marine Lab from 2005 to 2013. He had the foresight to get Jack to record the audio version of his book about the early years of the history of the lab. Here's how we'll do it. We're really fortunate to have had his foresight and all of the ichthyological knowledge that he's brought to the Shoals Marine. With that, Dr. Willie Bemis.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm so happy to have been invited to talk.
All of you go away for.
Okay. I'm not sure what to do here. You back, Jim? You want
to? After Willie is done, but we're okay.
All right.
Okay, because my battery is about to die.
Oh.
And my notes blew away.
Poor Jim. All right. Well, I'll just make a few brief remarks. I wanted to thank Sarah so much for coming in with such a strong program this summer and, such wonderful things going on. I'm really happy for the lab. And Louise, I have such memories of visiting you and Jack at your house here in Ithaca. I remember the bluebird boxes and watching the birds with you and just wonderful times. I have a few stories I wanted to tell you. They're all brief. I first met Jack 50 years ago when I was an undergraduate here. I was a couple of years ahead of Jackie Webb. Uh, and I took invertebrates from Dr. Anderson. I think it was actually the fall of 1973, and they were just back from having the first class on Appledore. And everybody was immensely excited about this because we actually had our invertebrate uh, class in Jack Kingsbury's lab. So we had all kinds of interactions going on, but he was racing around and always doing things, an absolutely fascinating person in that orbit. And my TA for that invertebrates class was Chuck Walker. And Jackie, I do not have my cards anymore. I remember that he marked me down, Chuck did, for not having closed some lines in my art. And of course, that lesson stuck with me. And I do a lot of, sort of diagrammatic art myself now. And it's fun to think back to those days in Anderson's class and Kingsbury's lab. Jan was a new graduate student when I was there, and I remember, Jan, that I used to climb in through the window of your office there. And it was a narrow window. I certainly couldn't get through it now, but it was far easier than going the long way around to get into Anderson's lab. I also want to mention Tom Johnson, who was a member of the class of 76, like me. We didn't know each other at the time, but we became good friends after I came to Shoals. And I just am really impressed with his participation in those early years. Those are great stories. I didn't go to Shoals as an undergraduate. It was a great mistake, but I was focused on reptiles and I wanted to go Southwest, and that's what I did. But I eventually got invited back or invited to Shoals to speak after JB was the director. I had taken Verts here at Cornell when JB was the head TA. And once he stepped into the role as director and I moved to Massachusetts, where I was relatively nearby, he invited me to come out and contribute to FMS. And those were still the early days in Founders. There were sheets for the walls at Founders at the time I was going in the 80s. But it was a wonderful, wonderful place. And it was, as Jim said, it's a magical place. And you can't go there and not be fascinated by all the things around you. I mean, it's just endlessly fascinating place. I became the Shoals director in the spring of 2005. And I'd met Jack and talked with him quite extensively during my interview visits for the position. But after I was here, I found myself talking to Jack about all manner of things. I loved going up there to his office space in Gooderman Hall. And it was sort of fun because he had his Baja, his Subaru Baja, I think was what it's called, out there in the back. He could park free. So I would go and see him, walk through those wonderful greenhouses and get this, tremendous sense of, I don't know, just I like being in greenhouses. But I I would go to his office and we would sit there and sometimes talk for hours. And it was everything under the sun. We talk about history, we talk about the lab, we talk about opportunities that the lab might have. It was endless. And I love Jack for those conversations and for that time that he spent with me. He was completely reassuring at difficult times. And probably the most difficult time was during the recession of the 2008, 2009. Yeah, we were really afraid that we might lose the lab because we had problems with our with our sanitation system, and we weren't going to be able to open unless we had a solution. So I talked to Jack a lot about that, And I want to also, thank everyone who was involved in that project, particularly Ross Hansen, for having the foresight to get the a suitable site plan for the big leach fields. So we got the leach fields in and we opened the lab. It was an amazing event. And then after that, following on Jim's examples for applying for field and marine station funds from NSF, we got another grant to build the toilet building and the associated water systems. This was all very exciting to Jack and to all of us, I think. And it was really funny, the reception at NSF, because we were basically asking for the money to build composting toilets there. And nobody in that group at NSF could believe that we were really going to do this. It was really going to happen. But they gave us the money after I think it pleaded with them. I don't remember. But it was a very exciting time. And that Jack would come out to the island and he'd stay and walk around with me and show me old trails that had either overgrown or for whatever reason weren't in good condition. And he just had such incredible pearls of wisdom about not just Appledore but just everything. I mean, he's an amazing guy. And I remember his visits so clearly because was he loved the island, and so he was happy to come back. And that was a really really fantastic time. So I just want to say in closing, oh, I have one more story I'm going to tell you. This is when we were recording. Here's how. We organized this through an operation called Rep Studio here in Ithaca, and we go down there and Jack would read. And you can't read a whole book at once. This takes a lot of different, sessions to get the whole thing. And also you have to, really work hard to get the errors out. Sometimes people will go back and read a line again or whatever it might be. But these people were super professional with Jack, and I think they really enjoyed the chance to deal with that sort of mega project. It really was a big project. So I want to thank everybody again. And I'm sorry that I couldn't be there yesterday, Louise. I am teaching. I'm teaching ichthyology, which I hope Jack would approve. But it's Appledore is a very, very special place in my memory. Thank you.
It's not. The light's on. Hasn't been open just I'm really good.
I cannot see me. I hope you can hear me. Um, can someone let me know if I'm being heard? Anybody? Is anybody there? I don't know what's happened. We can see and hear you. I guess you can hear me. I don't see you, but I'll just go from here. Um, so as I was saying that in my experience, I never knew Jack as a young man and certainly not as a child. Um, um, but let's face it, you cannot talk about Shoals Marine Lab without talking about Jack Kingsbury, period. Without Jack, there would be no lab. We know that. You all know that. I'm speaking to the choir here. You know better than I that without Jack's vision and enthusiasm and tenacity and bulldoggedness, the lab would never have been. It was his vision, his insight, his enthusiasm, his persistence, his tenacity that made it happen. And because of that, Jack and the Shoals Marine Lab has changed the lives of countless people, as we have seen with Jackie's talk. Uh, the Shoals is a completely remarkable place. It's replicated in many places around the world in certain ways, but never quite to the way that it happens at Shoals. And Jack knew the importance of this goal, and that was to provide answers to 6 questions at a critical time in a young person's life. What are those 6 questions? First, you take young people at a critical time of their lives. So that's the when and the who. It's when they're in a transition from being raised by a family to being out on your own. So this is a critical time. And he realized that that would be a point at which you could really change careers in a way that almost can't happen at any other time. And then you take those young people and you put them in an incredibly beautiful place, Appledore Island, and isolated from their regular lives. Then you give them fascinating information about marine science, especially delivered by passionate individuals at this magical place. You tap into their curiosity and you have a recipe for changing lives forever. And Jack did that. And without him, none of us, basically, everybody in the audience there, anybody listening, would be where we are now. Jack changed my life much later in my life because of what he had put in place earlier. Taking a bunch of derelict buildings on a formerly vibrant, with an island with a vibrant community, and with a lot of sweat and volunteers, he created this magical place called Appledore. Jack knew oceans, I mean, organisms. He knew the ocean. He knew students. He was a bulldog. No obstacle was too big. And he was observing changes that were taking place in the marine communities around the world, especially with the MBL and Woods Hole, where it was changing from focusing on undergraduate education to focusing more on graduate education and research, especially in the molecular directions. And he saw a place that a niche that needed to be filled by some place. And he knew enough about the coast, and he knew Appledore from his time at Star Island, and he made it happen. And all our lives are the better for that. I came on to Shoals after JB's time. And so those are two giant shoes to fill, Jack's and JB's. And coming from the outside, it was a pretty daunting task. But you know, the community at Shoals and the way it just takes you in, and everybody pulls together and works together, you can make it work. And I've had experience at places like the Catalina Marine Sciences Center, Friday Harbor, the Banfield Marine Sciences Center, where I'm just across channel from that place right now, working in Bali, working at the MBL, and many places. All of them have a bit of the flavor of Shoals, but none of them have quite that impact on undergraduates, in my experience, the way that Shoals has done, and with its focus on undergraduate education. What else can I say? It's a remarkable place, and I am so privileged to have been part of that and to have known Jack and experienced his enthusiasm and his love for the marine world. And with that, I think I'll give it back to you all back on Appledore Island.
Still talking, still talking. Good. Okay. Jennifer Seavey was the first executive director of the lab, serving from 2014 to 2023. She oversaw the movement of the Shoals offices from Cornell to the University of New Hampshire and the expansion of the Shoals connections to the Seacoast area. It's also important to note that she is related to Jack through Celia Thaxter. Dr. Jennifer Seavey.
There, you stole my thunder then. I just want to say, in this moment, having this crowd here and having all the directors talk, it's a really, I feel the time, and how we all take care of this place. And that the Shoals Marine Lab is part of this trajectory of taking care of this island, a very rich, incredible history that Jack really understood well, and I appreciate it a lot. And those of you who know me know that I like to invoke poetry. So I actually want to begin with one of my favorite poems, and it became my favorite because of this job. And it really, to me, speaks to the essence of the Appledore schoolhouse that Jack envisioned. And it is called Breakage by Mary Oliver. I go down to the edge of the sea, how everything shines in the morning light, the cusp of the whelk, the broken cupboard of the clam, the open blue mussels, moon snails, pale pink, barnacle scarred, and all and nothing at all whole or shut, but tattered and split, dropped by the gulls on the gray rocks, all the moisture gone. It's like a schoolhouse of little words, thousands of words. First, you figure out what each one means by itself, the jingle, the periwinkle, the scallop, full of moonlight. Then you begin slowly to read the whole story. I mean, I feel like Jack Kingsbury could have also written that. It is a sentiment that really he lived. He envisioned this place where students would sit at the edge of the sea, the tide pool, do that Shoals position, right? Butt in the air, head down, and understand nature, observe nature, like Jan said, get out in the field. And this place has become a beacon of place-based education, revealing, as he said, the raw, exquisite, absorbing essence of this main island. He nurtured the magic of this place and transformed the power into learning, the direct engagement with the natural world. As Nietzsche once said, quote, "When I look at the ocean, I feel the presence of something much greater than myself." And Dr. Kingsbury understood that power of awe and wonder. And that's what makes this place so powerful for students. I remember an evening, raise your hand if you ever saw Jack's ambiogram. The way he signed his signature so you could flip it upside down, and it was the same thing. And he would carry a card in his pocket, and he would show you that. He saw things from multiple angles. And that struck me as how he lived his life. Before E.O. Wilson popularized the idea of consilience, Jack was living it. He integrated history, art, maritime culture, and science, natural history into knowing a sense of place, to know a place. He was truly a Renaissance man and just saw the world through that lens. One of my fondest memories of him was a sunset spent on the namesake house. My father was on the island, and my father and Jack both, as many of you know, Jack was very into genealogy, and my father was into it at that moment. And they figured out how we were related through Celia Thaxter, which I did not know. I knew I had a connect. There's an island here. I knew I had a connection to the Isles of Shoals, but I didn't know that it was connected through Celia Thaxter and the founding director of this lab. And that moment was very meaningful for me personally, just to have this connection to this place and our shared passion that we had for celebrating the wonder of the ocean and science and education. And that has always remained with me as a source of inspiration. I know many of you witnessed how Jack might be one way on the mainland, but the moment he stepped onto his namesake boat, he just transformed into the islander that he was. And I remember one time just being a little bit nervous about him in his later years. And he got on the boat and he took the wheel and bam, he was 30 years younger. And he just sort of seemed to transcend time and space here. He definitely belongs to these rocky ledges, and this will always be a part of him, and his spirit will always be here. I just want to take a moment collectively in this room. We need to remember the important role that he played in protecting the Isles of Shoals from Onassis oil. And he was instrumental. There's politicians and newspaper writers who were amazingly influential in that time, but he brought science into that fold and was a huge advocate and a big part of why that didn't happen and why we all get to enjoy the entire Isles of Shoals and Great Bay as it is today. So hats off to him for that. He definitely battled, right? He was a good battler with Onassis, with universities. I don't know which was more difficult. Mother Nature sometimes. So I just want to appreciate his bigger impact on the entire seacoast, not just this lab. So he is a legend that will be around for a long time. His spirit will be forever intertwined with this island and the Isles of Shoals and will continue to call us from its shores. And so, of course, I have to invoke Celia in this. So I'll just read a little bit of one of her poems and just think about Jack calling to us. To feel the wind, sea-scented on my cheeks, to catch the sound of dusky flapping sail, the dip of oars, the voices on the gale. Afar off, calling low, my name they speak, the sad caressing murmur of the wave that breaks tender music on the shore.
On this island, there are so many things that remind us of Jack's legacy. From the things bearing his name, the title of the directorship, the Kingsbury House, and the RV John M. Kingsbury, or as he called it, the RV namesake, to the layout of the dorms, the utility building, Higgins Commons, PK Lab, the renovations of Hamilton and Layton, and most especially the sighting of the transects. How many Shoals students refer to their experience by their transect number? I saw Jack several times on Appledore, but I knew him as a graduate student, not as a student in one of his classes or as a colleague. So much of what I know of Jack, I've learned through reading and listening to his book, Here's How We'll Do It, several times this summer. His foresight, ingenuity, dedication, and commitment continue to serve as a model for our work on the island. Jack's primary focus was undergraduate training, in his words, in the broadest sense of the word. The classes provided both academic and practical knowledge. I've learned this summer that he taught students the anatomy of the lobster and then how to cook it. He taught the students how to make fish nets and how to use them as hammocks. They learned how to explore the intertidal and to explore the rest of the natural world on Appledore. Jack also felt research was important, and the transect study that he established provides an incredible data set to see the changes in Appledore's intertidal zone, and now can be used to track the effects of global climate change in the Gulf of Maine. The lab's current strategic plan includes education and research, but it also includes being leaders in sustainability and intentionally building community. Jack's description of the early years show a clear dedication to both of these clear priorities. The original proposal for the lab included limiting the lab's capacity to have a minimal environmental impact. During the construction years, the team reused and repurposed items to build and house our classrooms, labs, and dorms. And the contractors, donors, and host institutions provided overstock materials or items that were being replaced so they could find new life that otherwise would have been discarded, and it kept our costs down. Our mismatched plates, bowls, and flatware that you will be eating on today reflect this ethos of reuse and keeping items in use through the end of their useful life. Likewise, the creation and nurturing of community is a key part of the Shoals Lab history and strength, which Jack cultivated. Most classes are populated by students who've never met one another or their faculty members. Nevertheless, in 2 weeks, the students have bonded closely, and it is rare for a class to leave the island without at least a few tears, which Jack described from the earliest days of the classes at the Shoals Marine Lab. Our students find a truly supportive environment that reduces the barriers to learning, and the faculty members speak of the satisfaction and joy of teaching students in this environment where they learn so much and can see so much more of the interconnectedness of the marine environment because of how our classes are taught and structured. Jack did note that many of our faculty have started as students at Shoals. The students resonate with our emphasis on sustainable practices and see how their own actions affect the community. Of course, the luggage line and food run lines demonstrate that to everyone, students, faculty, and staff, that we are all part of a community required to run the lab. Jack's vision and perseverance created something truly special on Appledore, and his hand is evident in most of our daily activities at the lab. We still focus on learning by doing and by experiencing. We embrace the unexpected opportunity for a new learning experience for our students and for our faculty and staff. The relatively Spartan design of the dorms encourages students to spend relatively little time in their dorm room and rather to spend time in the labs, the classrooms, playing cards and Kiggins, hiking a trail, or watching a sunset. We marvel together at the natural world. We enjoy a kitchen that produces excellent meals and the family-style atmosphere of the Commons. And of course, we still use masking tape for name tags. Jack's spirit built the lab, the educational paradigm, and the true community that Shoals creates. Through those of us whose lives he touched, his spirit will always remain strong on Appledore and at the Shoals Marine Lab. I'd like to thank all of the speakers today for contributing to this tribute to Jack. I want to also take the opportunity to thank the whole Shoals team who have worked tirelessly to make this summer and each event, including today's tribute, successful. You'll have to bear with me because I am going to name a lot of names here. I want to make sure that I'm thanking the permanent staff, which include Dave, Matt, Ross, Amy, Wendy, Liz, Eugene, Diane, and Sally, who've been supporting us all in preparation for this summer and making sure that things are running smoothly on the island. Our captains, Steve and Roger, our engineers, Zach, Tanner, and Travis, our program staff, Maggie, Madeline, Jenna, and Cam, our cooks, Kate, Cam, and Sarah, our communications specialist, Rachel, and Terry, our garden steward and host extraordinaire. Jackie Webb, Wendy Lull, Jack Cutler, Ron Scher, Bob Meadows, and Tom Johnson helped in the planning and preparation of today's program. And I want to thank you all for being here today and helping us to honor our founding director, Dr. John M. Kingsbury.